I think that history does repeat itself. We did see the Egyptian people revolt before in 2011 against the dictatorship, 30-year rule of President Hosni Mubarak, and pretty much the same reasons that excited these demonstrators to go out and to protest are pretty much the same reasons that excite people today to go out and to revolt against President Sisi. Pretty much the same calls for reform, for charges against corruption. There's a lot of corruption at the governmental level, stifling of freedom, press freedom, human rights violations, a whole list of grievances that the Egyptian people really are trying to voice by going out and protesting. As you mentioned in introducing this topic, there's unfortunately more than 2,000 people arrested. That includes a wide array of people, includes journalists, bloggers, activists, opposition leaders, and I think that they were targeted specifically in order to try to halt, to hinder this new wave of protest on the streets of Cairo and other parts of Egypt, like the figures that are prominent in the opposition movement. Many of the opposition parties' leaders, other prominent activists and key figures in society have been rounded up and arrested in an attempt to try to halt this wave of protest. I think that the difference here is that just as the activists and protesters are learning lessons and building the learning curve, so are autocratic and dictatorial regimes, unfortunately. They're also building the learning curve. So this time they're like, okay, we're not going to be taken by surprise, like what happened on January 25th, 2011. This time we're going to be proactive. We're going to try to round up and arrest as many of the opposition key figures as we can before the eruption of even much larger protests.
So these protesters tried to mobilize Friday, but the security crackdown is almost impossible. There was a pro-demonstration, a pro-government demonstration that was allowed. That was allowed to continue with several hundred supporters. Who are the people that are backing the president in all of this?
There are definitely those who are benefiting from the current regime. There are, big businessmen, big people who have, a lot of interest in keeping things as usual. There's also a lot of, actors, actresses, people who have been recruited actually by the regime itself in order to try to give this kind of quote-unquote impression or picture to the outside world that, oh, he has his supporters as well. The numbers of these supporters, however, are not that significant. There have been both pro-Sisi and anti-Sisi protests, and the numbers have not been significant. What has been significant, however, is the harsh crackdown from the regime and what we have seen in terms of erecting barriers and places like checkpoints and trying to really kind of, block the main entries to key places like Tahrir Square, which is, of course, the iconic Liberation Square, the iconic place where people used to gather in the huge revolts and protests back in 2011. So I think that, this is the difference now between this wave of protests and also the one that we have seen before in 2011. And I think also another difference is the whistleblower. Just like we have a whistleblower here in the US, we do have a whistleblower in the case of Egypt. Muhammad Ali, this young man who is an actor, a contractor, he came out and shocked the whole world with these, videos that he has actually taped talking about corruption at the highest level of government among Sisi himself and his, family and supporters and people who are close to him and key military figures. And people started to really become very much, interested in watching his videos. And then Sisi himself came out and said, yes, I built so many presidential palaces that cost millions upon millions upon millions of dollars at a time when more than half of Egypt's population are living under the international poverty line. So that has really kind of, I think, made people feel very much frustrated and very angry.